Welcome to the Multifamily Interrogation Room. I'm your host, Tony Souza, and on today's episode, we have two multifamily operators, two multifamily suppliers, and we're here to solve the multifamily question. What's working between operators and suppliers? What's not working? And how do we fix it? I've asked the guests today to have strong points of views, strong opinions, and creative ideas on how to solve this problem. We're not leaving this room until we do. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Multifamily Interrogation Room. We're going to start right away with the question that I posed just moments ago. Operators, where's the disconnect between suppliers and operators in multifamily? And Maddie's saying you're looking right at me. But Maddie, we'll start with
Yes.
you. Where do you see there's a
Thank you.
disconnect?
I think from what I've seen, just from being boots on the ground, I think a big disconnect is that nobody feels heard in the industry right now,
Hmm.
both sides, because we're overwhelmed on the operator side. There's the buildings literally on fire,
Hmm.
clients on fire, everybody's upset and frustrated. They want their KPIs met, they want their goals hit. But our suppliers also have goals they need to hit and they just want to hear from us. So when we go dark, they take that as insulting. How dare they not reach out to me? When in all actuality, we're just overwhelmed.
So let me ask this question. And I personally don't disagree with you, and I don't know if
Of
anybody
course.
listening would disagree with you either. Is where did this stem from? Where did the disconnect stem from? How long has it been happening, and is it getting worse?
I mean, personally, I think it is getting worse just with the demand and the workload, especially on, regionals and as it flows up and even as it flows down to the on-site teams, leasing agents, we have to keep up with all these different softwares and different things.
Hmm.
The expectation is just growing and growing. And I know the expectation is growing on the supplier side too. I can only imagine the demand coming from your bosses and your companies to hit the goals. I
Hmm.
think it's been, from my perspective, at least an issue for the last 5 years.
Interesting. Tina, what's your take?
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I don't think it's intentional at all. I think that when I think about what's in our way, it's time, right? We all have such limited time. I've been in this business now for 35 years, and it felt easier then to find the time to sit down over coffee
Yeah.
or lunch
Hmm.
and build relationships. And to your point, we are bombarded, right, all day long with so many new needs and demands and programs, and we simply don't have the time.
Right.
And so it ends up being this prioritization
Hmm.
of where can we get it, where can we fit it, how do we do it? And I just don't think it's intentional, but I think it's real.
Interesting.
Mhm.
I have some additional questions, but I'm going to allow this side of the table to sort of speak to the disconnect from your perspective. Obviously, you heard the operator. Savannah, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
The disconnect. Where is it? How long has it persisted? And we'll get to how we solve it later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a big disconnect, and I can speak from both sides of
Hmm.
being on the operator side, being approached by
Hmm.
suppliers, as well as being a supplier. I think there's just a lot of tech saturation. And
Mm.
I think part of that tech saturation, in my opinion, is that there is a lack of listening to what the problems are. And there's more of a trying to build technology to sell technology
Right.
versus build solutions to solve problems. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of tech changes that happen. And there's a lot of opportunity that's seen for new tech to enter to solve a problem. But then there is a lack of forum from the supplier side to
Mhm.
hear those problems. So
So,
if,
so I think you
yeah,
make a great point, and I'm very curious in the additional points. And I
yeah.
apologize for cutting you off, but you said there's a lack of forum uh, to to learn what those problems are. I think is how you referred to it. What do you mean by that? Is there just not a space or some sort of platform for new technologies or new products and services to learn quickly?
Yeah.
And the reality is maybe it shouldn't be quickly. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
right? It shouldn't be take a 6-month course and learn everything about multifamily.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, so tell me about this lack of forum, and maybe there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, I think to your guys' point, the time,
Hmm.
right? So to be able to speak to one on one with people to understand the problem or the solution that I'm providing and sell to you, and if that fits,
Hmm.
is a lack of time and a lack of response, right? But also when we go to these big conferences,
Right.
we're expected to show up and have booths and to
Mhm.
sponsor things and to do vendor things versus sitting on the sessions and learning about the problems. So there's an expectation on the vendor side as well to put on a big show and to have all of this presence, and we're not listening to the problem. So the operators do the sessions and the vendors do the show. And I think there's a lack of forum to bring them together to actually hear the problems and understand if your solution's fitting them.
Yeah, very well said. It's interesting. I can't determine from my experience, you know, is it the pressure on the supplier side to put on the big show in the expo hall, or is it the lack of interest in wanting to go to the sessions to listen to the operators? My sense
Exactly.
is it's both,
Yeah.
to be honest. I don't think there's a strong urgency to want to hear from them. And I think that's missed opportunities. And it sounds like you would agree to that as well, Savannah. David, where do you see this disconnect? Obviously, you've heard a lot. You've had the chance to hear from 3 others, but I know you have your opinions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately it's a combination of everything that's been said, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Operators and suppliers are feeling greater constraint than ever. A sense of urgency and immediacy in driving results and managing razor thin margins on, both sides of the business. Property managers are dealing with literal fires happening right now, right? And then there's this conflict around, I think, what Savannah mentioned with conferences. I was really optimistic in the first half of the year
Mhm.
that the conferences that I attended were felt as if they were educating the market in the emerging trends, like
Mm.
particularly around AI. It really felt like there was an emphasis on creating educated decision makers. But the overall challenge with conferences, even if that is the forum for education, is that it's a marketing exercise, right? And it's a marketing expense. And I don't think operators are anti-tech, right? I think
No.
operators are anti-risk. And a big driver of risk is confusion and ambiguity.
Mhm.
And so when you're hearing all of these platforms saying that they all do the same thing, right? And there isn't the resource to help cut through the
Understand where those
BS,
things are. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right.
And understand what questions to ask, and more importantly, what to do with the answers you get.
yeah.
Um, it creates that fear of risk because now you're in paralysis analysis.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
so, I think it's partially what Savannah said about a lack of forum. I think conferences have an opportunity, but understanding that they're marketing expenses and they're marketing exercises, it just continues to feed, I would go so far as to say, here's my hot take, Tony,
Mhm.
the misinformation loop
Sure.
on the supplier side of the
Well, I
industry.
think you make a really good point, David. I won't name the conference, but I think recently I sat and listened to hours of 4-minute pitches, and I couldn't help but think, walking away from that, as still a former operator, it was like testing coffee for 4 hours. Like at some
Yeah.
point, and really quickly, early on, right? It was like these all taste the same, right? These coffees all taste the same, and it actually made me feel for those up on stage because it's a momentary opportunity. Obviously, there's money involved, transacted there to be on stage to give those pitches. 4 minutes is obviously a limited amount of time, but it's a lot of time as well. But when you're doing it with 50 other pitches
Yeah.
or maybe more, it's a challenging circumstance.
Yeah.
And who's in the room to
Yeah.
make those decisions, Tina?
Yeah. So, I want to make a
Yeah.
quick comment to something that Savannah said, which was back to the trade show floor and the conferences.
We were going to get to the conference, but we're going to get right into it now.
Okay, and we can go back for
Sure.
sure. But
Let's get to
I resonated with what you said because I do think that there's a lot of pressure. I suspect right on the partners, the industry partners, to put on the trade shows, whether it's at an industry event or a company event, right? I know when we do ours, like everyone loves it because it's an opportunity to have that face to face.
You're saying property management companies
Property
that
management
throw their
companies
own
that throw their
conferences as
own,
well,
right?
Yeah.
Which
Like,
is a new trend.
yeah,
over the
it is
last
a new
five,
trend.
Yeah.
5 years or so.
But I think it's very well attended and very well desired. But for me, we go to conferences in 2 parts, right? One is to learn because there is so much information. And yes, there are 50 products. They all intersect somehow, but not entirely. So it's like trying to understand the dissection of that. I love the trade shows. Why? Because for me, those are the moments where I can go and meet the industry partners, learn about new products, ask questions. It's like the face time that you want, and it's the face time that I'm expecting myself to give.
Yeah.
So I thought that it was interesting that the pressure and the burden that you might be feeling, for me, I go for the sessions and the learning because we have to keep learning, right? But I go too because that's the opportunity for me to say, hey, I want to learn about these 50 new programs because I'm confused and I don't
Right.
get it. And I don't know why this one over that one, right? Or
Yeah.
both. Like, is
Right.
there a both or is it a one or the other? Because it is a lot, right?
How can, uh, great points, Tino. How can conferences potentially restructure for the sake of suppliers, but also, because I would argue suppliers ultimately pay for the production, right? Pay for the conference, let's
Yeah.
be honest. And the main customer, I would argue, is, and maybe I don't have to argue with anybody because it's true, is operators, right? Like that is the main customer audience to learn and to also vet new technologies, right? Essentially to the point that you just made. How do you think, Tino, obviously you've been in the industry and you've seen conferences come and go. Now you're seeing property management conferences arise, and some are being very effective, a lot more intimate. I think this is an opportunity for some of the large, both national, regional, and local conferences to be listening, right, to operators and suppliers, frankly. How can education in understanding new product services, not just technology, but again, technology sector I understand is kind of new to the business over the last 5 to 7 years, give or take. But how can conferences kind of restructure? Is it in more collaborative small group settings? Have you thought about this? Do you have any ideas?
I do. I mean, for me personally, and I hate to admit it, but it's true. I don't go to the same conference every year because I feel like at least 2 years in a row, it's the same content, right? And again, back to the time, like, okay, where is my time best spent? I will often say, okay, this year I'm going to skip this one. I'll go to that one next year because I'm trying to get new information, right? But you've got the trade shows, you've got the educational sessions. What if the folks that put these on, whether company or program, industry program, what if we created sessions where there could be, and I think there are these joint audiences, right, of suppliers and operators,
Open
but
dialogue.
open dialogue about, hey guys, here's, we understand here's the 5 new, options or solutions or strategies or procedures, right? Whatever it is.
But I sense what you're suggesting, even. I'm gonna let you finish,
Yeah.
Tina, but it not in like a competitive pitch fashion, right?
Correct.
In more of a true education fashion. And I can relate to this as an operator a long time now, working with suppliers. I've had to educate myself on some of this tech as well, and it made me think, wow, I thought I knew, but I didn't really
Right.
know.
It's about partnerships to me. The way I see this is it's a partnership. I can think of some vendor partners that I've worked with for all 30 years, and maybe the business cards have changed, but there's a partnership because when I have a question or a need or vice versa, we can call each other. It's not about if I don't get the business, then I won't. It's like, hey, we're an all-in partner. We're in this together. Let's figure it out. That I think is a big missing ingredient. It's the all-in partnership, whether you are working together formally or not, because you never know when that day comes.
You never know formally when you may.
That's right. That's right.
And I think sometimes what you're referring to, and you guys have seen this as well, is like, well, if there's no business oppo there, then I think it goes back to time though too for you guys as well. Manny, I want to get your thoughts on this, and I want to circle
sure.
back around trade shows, conferences, opportunities there.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with Tina. I mean, I think you nailed it. This is a symbiotic relationship, right? Like our success is your success and vice versa. I think it does need to be more of a collaborative conversation because we all should be identifying the blind spots within the industry. Ultimately, it affects all of us. If there's litigation coming our way or legislation coming our way, you guys need to be just aware of that as well because it's going to affect you inadvertently or directly. So I completely agree with that. I think it does need an overhaul. I don't necessarily know what the answer is,
Sure.
but I think that we need to identify the pressure valve and figure out how to make that more collaborative.
I hope we're doing some of the first initial steps that you
Yes.
do in any discovery phase, right? Is having conversations, open forum conversations like this one, and I'm sure there's others behind the scenes happening about what's working, what's not,
Right.
obviously, and how do we fix it. And that's obviously this is what the show is predicated on. But hopefully those conversations are happening more and more. And unfortunately, I think over many years, historical years, I don't know if it's been a completely open and honest dialogue
I
about
agree
what's
with that.
working, and now we're sort of at a crux because market conditions are tough, right? Time is limited, and so now we're all here, and ultimately, I think a lot of a lot of folks are saying, like, how did we get here, and ultimately, how do we get out of here successfully together, right? Savannah, thoughts on you've really kind of kicked this whole conference and trade show again. Like anyone listening that organizes conferences, whatever the rap may be on, Tony's poo-pooing on this or that. I'm really not. Hopefully it's seen as bringing smart minds together to a table to talk about how we can do it better going forward. Now, it may take a couple years to get there, but that's okay. Conversations start now.
Yeah. I mean, hot take. I
And by the way,
think
you don't have to preference your hot take with a hot take. Just give it to us.
no, I think that another thing that I've noticed on the supplier side that prohibits those conversations because that's my interest, right? Those are the conversations I want to have versus being like hard sale, right? As a startup company, as a supplier, we're introducing our product to solve issues. I want to know what those issues are so we're building
And you
appropriately.
probably have some leg up as a former operator to some extent, but
But I'm only one person,
Right.
right? And so hearing voices is important to building a good product that's providing a solution. But I think there's a lot of inhibitors for vendors to participate in certain things because it's a
unpack those
pay. It's
inhibitors if you're willing.
yeah, it's a pay to play. So you have to pay in order to be present. Or it's an operators only event because they don't want you to sell there, right? But there could be parameters of like, we don't want to sell here. This is a networking event or whatnot. And as long as suppliers are willing to be respectful of that, which I know not all of us are, but if we are able to bridge that gap of the hard sell and being in an opportunity to hear and listen, then I think there would be more opportunities available for those conversations. But I think that a lot of times, because some of us ruin it for the bunch, right? That we aren't allowed in certain audiences because we are suppliers, and then that prohibits us from
Well, there's a couple of things that I personally
listening.
don't like about that, and David, I want to get your thoughts on it. Is two things: is the pay to play is not a secret anymore. So operators know people typically on stage are paying to play, right? And so
Yeah.
just because of that, I don't even call it. It's not an illusion anymore,
No.
right? It's very clear. And so because of that structure, and there's got to be a different way or a better way, and I think that's what we're trying to figure out today and in the future, because I think it just gives it's under some veil, right? That it's like, oh, you're trying to educate me, but really, what are you really trying to do? And so it causes just really a kind of a disconnect to start. And then also ultimately the second point that I wanted to make, and I'd like to kind of talk to the group about that, is over the years, I feel as though it's been allowed to speak to suppliers as second-class citizens. And I'll just say that. And having now some experience on this side, working closely with supplier partners, and seeing some of that tone, frankly, in email or interactions, has really made me uncomfortable as a former operator. I just don't think you should treat another human like that, let alone another part of the business. And it's largely why I wanted to bring people to the table to talk a little bit about that. So two things that you did say there: that's the pay to play, and then of course, bad suppliers are excluded from this working group because they're going to pitch. Understandably, I think conferences are trying to figure out how to protect operators per se, their customers. But I still think it gives a portrayal that suppliers are naughty, if you will. I'd like to talk about that momentarily. But David, I'd like your thoughts on these trade shows. Where there's some disconnect, maybe where there's some opportunities. You're a creative, smart guy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think when we look at our conference budget and our marketing spend in every year, right? Most of the supplier side are lean operating, bootstrapped or, small venture capital startups. And so it all has to boil down to ROI, right? And,
On both sides, yeah.
right, exactly. And the ROI on staffing and manning a booth, right? Are you going to get the right people, right? For every one person like yourself that comes by the booth, there's 10 people that won't hit the trade show floor at all while you're there. And then when you're selling a more mature or sophisticated product, you have multiple stakeholders in the decision-making process, right? And so maybe you get your foot in the door, maybe you have a conversation, but it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, right? And then it's the follow-up game and it's the chase. And so like being able to evaluate the ROI, and then and I think if the ROI is there, we're okay with we've
Mhm.
accepted the pay to play circumstance that we're in, right?
Well, I think if anyone, either side of the aisle, and I want to talk about the ROI of the business and relationships and maybe even conferences. Um, if the ROI is there, I
Mhm.
mean, you're going to allocate the resources for that. I mean, in almost anything you do. So I think it's a great point. Sorry, I
Yeah,
cut you off, David.
yeah, 100%. And then I think I've been saying this all year, and it's sort of been my personal professional journey in changing the way that I show up and the way
Mm.
that I represent my brand is um,
You're saying company and personal brand almost?
uh, company brand.
Sure.
Yep. Uh, there's there's a need for education, right? The technology is evolving and growing at a faster rate than it ever has,
Mhm.
and it's built in the nuance, right? And we're shifting from this culture of like, what does your product do, that you need to understand more of how does your product do it, right? Like, the future is how a partnership works, and so having agnostic education in the industry where it's not paying to be on a
Right.
panel and you're putting together your marketing deck and you're selling a vision of what
Product centric.
your product will be when you have enough scale or you have
Mhm.
enough
Right.
customers,
Right.
but actually understanding how to lift the hood and dig into what the technology is capable of doing today, right? And addressing that elephant in the room of what the industry is ready for versus the visions that are being sold.
Mm.
And then how do you decipher, millions of dollars a year in marketing spend from these companies to tell you the story without any context or meat on the bone?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. That's actually a really great point that you make, David. Operators, and Tina, I'll start with you. Obviously, a wealth of experience in the business is how are you sourcing new products and technologies? And again, we have a couple folks on the technology side, but I mean, there's a lot of different products and solutions that are
Sure.
out there, not tech focused. Obviously, there's a hyper focus on tech as we go forward in 2026. But how do you and your team, and
Sure.
how do you empower them as a leader to explore and be open-minded to
Sure.
new solutions?
Sure. I love that question. And by the way, side note, years and years and years ago, I had an industry partner say to me, I hate that you guys call us vendors.
Mm.
I've used the word industry partner ever since because to the point earlier
I've
about
noticed that. I
tucking
was going
down,
to actually
right?
ask you to.
It was very impactful to me. And I was like, wow, that must not have felt good if it felt like there was this,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so partners and
Yes.
and that goes back to everything I'm saying today, which is it's got to be a partnership. So something that we do that I think is really cool, we have what's called a house view.
Mm.
And our house view, unfortunately we can't work with everybody, right? Like it's so hard. I must get reach outs. I do daily, weekly. Hey. And I do everything in my power to make a connection somehow, right? But I'm not going to force a decision onto a regional or a VP, right? And I can't, it just won't work for
That's
you.
not ideal
It
leadership,
won't
right?
work for you because it'll feel, well, it'll be a forced marriage, right?
Yeah.
And it won't work for us, as an organization. So we have a committee of people, if you will, that's really a combination of our program kind of director, IT, because it feels like everything's IT now, right? And then operations. And so we will vet a group of programs and providers from anything from technology
How big is
to
this committee, Tina?
at any given time, it might be
5 to 8?
6, 7
Okay.
people. Okay. But it's representative of multiple departments, including accounting, because sometimes that's a problem, right?
Yeah,
Integration
yeah.
issue.
It is, yes.
And
Absolutely.
so, we'll look at different programs and solutions across the board. And then when we feel like we've got a good solution for us, right? Because again, we're a mid-sized company. We're not a million units or, 10,000 units, right? So we will then say, okay, we're going to beta test. And I love that because I've not always had the beta test opportunity, right? It's like, hey, we're doing this, go. No, we will take 3 or 4 properties, 2, 3 or 4 properties, and we will beta test and pilot a program. And we will then create a case study and decide if that indeed is a good partnership. And we don't isolate it to one per topic or,
Sure.
or program, but we will have and do have a very nice broad list of what we call house views and partners, which I think
It's
is
called
really,
house views.
it's our house view.
So it's the company's perspective on all an array of different things.
Correct. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really, I think, helpful because it also, from an operations standpoint, right? You can look at a house view on any type of
Mhm.
service or program, right, or
So
product.
you can go back as a leader, you can go back and take a look at some of the beta testing and some of the house views,
Yep.
right, or the
Case
case studies
studies,
that
yeah.
were developed to see what were some of the outcomes.
Yep.
Even historically, I would imagine
Uh,
you were able to go back and take a look at it.
Absolutely.
Because
And
maybe you weren't ready for that product or solution at that time, but maybe in a few years you
exactly.
will be.
Yeah. So we may launch something and our penetration is small, right? Because we're in third party. So the clients have to agree, right? And then we will see over time, like where we are now with the integration and the absorption of
Mm.
that. And I love that because also, our clients,
Mhm.
it's their dollars,
Sure.
Mhm.
right? And it's like, well, what is the ROI?
Mhm.
Give us the facts, give us the data. And so
Mhm.
those pilot
And also do
programs.
the work to get that ROI,
Yes.
right?
And so those pilot programs and those case studies are really compelling. I
Mhm.
would say when we do launch a new product and we share the case studies with our clients, and then we'll have a demo
Mm.
session where that partner or partners will have clients on the call to help talk through, the program or the solution. It's very helpful.
How do you identify, how do you identify what solution you're going to put through beta? Do you have another committee that sort of vets, which solution or technology we're going to pursue? How does that happen?
It's that same group,
Okay.
really. I mean,
So they're
obviously,
vetting
there's some
and
they're
sourcing.
vetting it, and
Mhm.
they're then saying, "Okay, guys, we're going to beta test this
Mhm.
program or this product, or go down
Mhm.
the list, right?" And then we will. And I would say most of the time, 9 times out of 10, that product ends up being a good solution, right?
Sure.
There have been times where, like, ooh, we found a kink or two, and
Yeah.
that's not going to work for our
Yeah,
company.
I'm glad you said that, Tina, because from my experience has also been, and I'm sure there's some not good product out there. I'm sure, but for the most part, I mean, everyone's product is good, right? Like, but I think what you're trying to source is great, right? And also more specifically, I think what works best for your org.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Maddie, your thoughts on some of this, on how your organization do they do something similar, or do they employ regionals, VPs, maybe property managers out into the field to source new technologies, depending on the size of the company.
Right, right. I work for a smaller company now, so
But
we don't-
you've worked with an array of different.
yes,
I know your background.
yes. We've been some of the same backgrounds.
Mhm.
I would say I prefer the smaller side because we're allowed to make these decisions and elect to, what suppliers we want to work with, as long as they're within the realm of, all the policies that they need to follow on the supplier side for
Mhm.
contracts and such. But if we feel that the product is going to work well for the property, the personality of the property, the client, we have a lot of free reign, which I appreciate, versus some of the larger companies in my past
Sure.
life where they would say, you're going to use this supplier.
Mhm.
And if you don't, there's going to be consequences for that.
Sure.
I think that also kind of attributes to some of the disconnect as well, because I know it would create a little bit of tension between the on-site teams and the suppliers.
Sure.
Like what you said beautifully, a
That
forced
forced
marriage.
marriage, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they don't want to do that. And so I think that does create a little bit of tension there. But thankfully now we have the ability to choose who we want to use. I have a lot of freedom in that sense. So if I have the relationship with you and you understand my heartburn and the issues I'm having at this specific property, we can roll it out here. Versus same thing with you. I have another property with another set of issues. We can use it there and it may work better there.
Yeah, I think that from my experience working mid-size boutique, if you will, and also large company, is ideally, if you're a large company, you want to find a way to try to run things that feels boutique, right? That also feels as though you're listening to important decision makers, even at the site level to some extent.
Right.
Maybe you have a committee of property managers or regional managers. That is and Tina, I know you've been with both big and mid-size. That is the challenge of every big asset, and you guys know that in interacting with them. Savannah, any thoughts to what you just heard some of the operators talk about how they go about sourcing new products and services? Are you surprised by anything they said?
No, not at all. But I do think that I have an observation of both working with a variety of different clients and making relationships in the industry and working in the industry that what I hear is a lot of leadership disconnect or communication disconnect can cause misrepresentation of the technology that you're
So
using.
just to unpack that for the listening audience is maybe just for me.
Yeah.
But you're saying the disconnect within property management orgs,
Yeah.
right? So you have high level folks that either need to decide or are choosing technology, whatever the case is. There's
Bias.
there's a disconnect
Mhm.
between on-site operations or regional management
Yep.
operations and executive decision making. However, however the technologies or the product or solution is vetted, either discovered at the lower level
Yep.
or discovered at the high level, there's seems as though what you're saying is there's a disconnect between the two.
Exactly. As well as with the ownership
Right.
groups, I think for third parties. I think there has been
So like layered disconnect.
yeah, even
Mhm.
when you get in front of a company and you start implementing even on a beta or a full rollout, there's a lack of engagement maybe on the site teams or on the local teams, and then as a supplier, you're held responsible to that engagement, right? And so it's
And the
hard.
success or failure of
The
your
success,
solution is predicated on, from my experience, and you guys disagree with me or not, but is buy-in at all levels,
exactly.
ownership, executive,
Yeah.
and site level.
Yeah.
And if there's not that buy-in, it means sometimes the technology is not working. So it's hard as a supplier to be held responsible to an engagement rate that the leadership is
How do
not
we?
Yeah.
I
supporting.
want to get Tina's thoughts on that. I think
Yeah.
it's a great point you make.
I think that's fair. And I think one of the reasons why we do the beta is because we want the buy-in, right? We want the operators
And
to
in that committee, you have layers in there. too,
correct.
right?
We want the operators to be able to test out, experience, understand the value
Mhm.
and the impact for them. Because at the end of the day, if it's going to make their job easier, right?
Yeah.
If it's going to make the experience for the customer better, there is likely more buy in. But I fully agree with you because look, we've
Mhm.
rolled plenty of programs out in any of my companies that if you're not utilizing the technology or the program, it will not work.
Yep.
It's like you may have a solution, but if you're not using it or using it the way it was intended to be used, you won't get the full value,
Right.
and then you won't see that
Well,
same value
And I think the
return.
nature of the business sometimes too, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is suppliers or industry partners are seen as less than, and as operators, I think we can attest to this, and I think you're feeling this sometimes. Is okay, we don't have full buy-in, but if it doesn't work, right, who do we blame?
Yeah.
Right.
These guys, right?
Yeah.
Because you guys didn't train it
Fair.
right, and you guys didn't, do X, Y, and Z right. God forbid it had anything to do with our teams, right?
Yeah.
When the reality is it's probably a combination, right? There can always be better training, better rollouts, of course, and I'm sure on your guys, and I see it firsthand now, right, that you guys are trying to figure that out and do an exceptional job at that. But at the same time, I think we all know that sometimes our systems internally can be really clunky as well.
But what are we doing about that, right?
Yeah.
So when you see or we see, right, because we're both seeing it, this doesn't seem to be working. Like, and I'll just use a recent example. We were working with a group and we were not seeing the results. The data wasn't there, and it wasn't something that the team, there was no like deliverable that the team had to do. Like it was an SEO. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so the conversation then was, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're not seeing, here's what we need to see. It was very much like, oh, well, you're wrong.
So the supplier
The
partner was
supplier
telling you were
partner
wrong.
was basically saying, no, we know what we're doing the right things, we're using the right words, and you guys aren't, it's got to be something you're doing. And this was particularly on a community where like we knew without a doubt that the team was absolutely their
Stellar.
conversions, their closing, right? And so, but because of that lack of partnership versus our other partner,
Yeah.
which was like, okay, guys, let's talk about this. Like, tell me, what is the customer saying?
Right.
Tell me, what are you hearing? Okay, why do you think that is? Okay, let's do this night and day. And that partnership went away because at the
You're
end of
saying
the
the first
partnership, sorry, yes, the first partnership we dissolved because we were like, we can't work with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a true, hey guys, let's work together. It was, no, we're right, you're wrong, and you just got to go with it.
Yep.
And we're like, but the results aren't there,
Yeah.
right?
That's a wonderful point, David. I love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I'm going to speak to a point that Tina and Savannah both made. First, I think it's great, right, that vendors want to be called industry partners, right? But I think that's a title that has to be earned because there are still vendors in the industry,
Acting as
Yep.
such, I think
right?
what you're saying.
And it's, everybody that's connected to the industry is hearing that pain point from our customers. And so now it's the new marketing buzzword of, we're your technology partner, or we're your industry partner.
Right. If you hear that word, that partner word one more time, and you're not genuinely a partner, I don't want to ever hear it again.
Right. Right. And so I think part of that gets coupled with what Savannah was saying in the disconnect is I think there's a tendency with the executive decision makers that they're buying the outcomes, right, that you spoke to, Tina. And there's still a lack of understanding in the how those outcomes are to be delivered, right? An understanding of the technology, just the blocking and tackling of what the technology is supposed to do and how it's supposed to function. And so, and then we get the friction, right? If it is an executive decision maker and it's trickling down, right? A lot of times our core customer is only learning about Lively at their onboarding call. The demo's been done with the person that signs the check, the contract's been executed, we've got the initial materials, and now we're scheduling the kickoff call with the site teams and the regionals that are just exploring it for the first time.
Right.
And so it starts already a little bit behind the eight ball because there isn't always the organic excitement, right? Leadership hasn't painted the vision of what they're trying to solve for the team, let alone how they're planning to solve it. And so we become very intentional with our onboarding process, right? It is about getting those operators that are going to be using our platform on a daily basis to understand how the technology is going to work for them and how it's going to deliver the outcomes they're being held accountable to. But when we start behind that eight ball, even just getting the users to show up for that initial training call or that initial kickoff call because the communication
And the
is
nature of those
broken.
roles too, right? We talked about time, right? Even to show up for a kickoff call, which they probably have good intentions to do that,
Right.
right? It's on their schedule,
Yeah.
but a literal fire
A
happens,
literal fire.
or,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
resident just storming in.
Yep.
I do want to,
I
yeah,
just want to finish my thought real quick because I think it perpetuates then. So we offer every single one of our customers a monthly business review, or if their cadence would rather be quarterly, like
that's great.
we set aside the time
Yeah.
and the attendance on those is 50-50 of the right decision makers or the right people being in there, or needing to reschedule, or we're sitting in a Zoom room and it's 10 minutes after the hour and
Yeah.
we're trying to track it down. And so trying to take that partnership approach, that in our product evolves every 2 weeks. Like we ship product every 2 weeks. There's
Yeah.
new features, there's new nuances. And so we're trying to be that partner because it's the DNA of what we were founded on.
Yeah.
And so getting the flow through of buy-in and communication from the executive decision maker to, what
Yeah.
outcomes are we intending to provide with this solution? And then let us as the partner come in and fill in the gaps on how we're going to help you deliver those outcomes. What is the technology going to do?
Well, I think well said, David, and Tina, thank you for your point as well. I think the word partnership, right, whether it be in a relationship or whether it be
Yeah.
in multifamily or anything like that, is a two-way street.
Mhm.
And obviously, what I'm hearing is it truly needs to be that. And I think where I think there's some opportunity for our industry is to take a step back and probably in some ways, like both sides of the aisle, humble themselves a little bit.
Right.
Say, I don't know if we've been the best partner. And for those in the room that are in relationships, that's probably a good tactic at home
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Always,
absolutely.
Right? To
Absolutely.
take a step back and say, listen, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I haven't been the best partner. And I think now is the time for our industry in some ways to kind of collectively do that, take a step back and say, there are probably some great solutions out there that we're missing, right? And at the same time, are there some industry partners acting like vendors, if you will, right? And do they need to take a step back and say, listen, okay, we need to be better industry partners to our side of the world as well, so that it's not causing more friction or causing more challenge. What I want to be able to transition to, thank you for these honest discussions. I do want to talk about some things, and I want to go to this side of the table again, that suppliers are doing well. Because obviously we've talked about some of the disconnect and we kind of started hot out of the gate with that, but let's talk about some of the things that they're doing well. But at the same time, also feel free, and I know Tina, you have some thoughts on this, is like some don't do this lists, right? Because I think that's helpful, not just for this side of the table, but for anyone listening. Maddie, I'll start with you though initially. Of what are some experiences that you've had that suppliers are doing it well, building good partnerships? And feel free to be as specific as you want, or as broad stroked as you want. But I think it's important that we talk about some things that are working.
Yes.
And then of course I think the audience would be, including me, curious about some of the things. Don't do that. That does not work for us.
What's really worked for me recently is partners who have specifically researched my portfolio or my properties to identify the pain points. Like I said before, heartburn that I'm specifically dealing with in the current climate where we're operating.
So how
And
do they approach? Because I'm hearing that a lot from operators
yeah,
that suppliers aren't taking the time and effort to do that appropriately. And
yeah,
so how did they approach you with that? How did they come at you and knew the size of your portfolio? How do they know your pain points? Because it's actually, frankly, hard to discover your pain points
it
just on a
is.
Google or ChatGPT search. Let's be honest, right? So
Yes.
what did they present to you, and how did they discover it?
So I actually had someone reach out to me via text message,
Okay.
not email. Like they knew me. They knew
Okay.
because
So this
you're
was a relationship you had.
yeah, they knew. No, they knew how to get in touch with me. So I guess they had researched how to speak to me specifically.
Okay.
Because if you send me a blanket email, I'm not going to read it. I have 3,000 emails that come in weekly. I'm not going to be able to touch it if it's just a blanketed one. This
Now they took
person,
a risk in texting you
they
because
did.
I get texted a lot, and I don't always respond to that either. Tina, you
True.
probably agree, maybe you guys as well. So they did take a risk, but I commend the risk because maybe they knew Maddie doesn't answer emails.
They
So
do.
so they're like,
They
hey,
did know
I'll
that.
text her. Fair.
Bless my heart. They did know that. So they reached out to me via text. They're like, hey, we've heard that you've had some recent issues going on with fraud at your community based on these properties. I guess they have a software. I think I'm not sure which one, but it has the regional or the vice president, whatever that may be, and the properties that specifically roll up to them. So they knew exactly what was going on at my properties. Like,
How did they know that? Did they talk to the property managers, or did they have?
I think they had reached out individually to the managers. So they looked up the properties and unfortunately those areas,
So it caught your attention initially,
Yes.
and you knew that to be true because it was true.
it was true. I was like, okay, they really did research this. They talked to my property managers. They identified, well, we can resolve your issues by minimizing or shrinking the amount of debt or fraud that you have on the property by X amount. And I was like, I'm really intrigued by that. How is that going to work? And so we started communicating. I'm like, let's set up a call. Let's go have coffee. Let's talk about it. And now we've rolled it out and it's been amazing. It's actually reduced debt on the property by 30%
Wow.
within the first 6 months. So very impressed by that.
Wow, that's interesting. So on the flip side of that coin,
Mhm.
what are some experiences you've had that you just feel, and maybe it's email,
Yeah.
but what some things that you would recommend them not do?
Right.
And part of that
sure.
question too, and it came up in previous episodes, is do or don't visit site teams unannounced.
Definitely don't visit site teams unannounced. Especially, I know everybody says it all the time, the first of the month, closeouts
Mondays.
or Mondays, and sometimes maybe don't visit the corporate office unannounced because we could be in the middle of doing financial accounting or
I
whatever
always
that may
found
be.
that a little, even though it's the desperate
Yeah.
effort to find you, but like to go to the corporate office too,
Right.
even when residents show up there, right? You're like,
Yes.
okay, this is the situation, but it's good to know. Okay, so
Yeah.
don't go to the site
Don't
teams
do
unless you
that.
have an appointment. Don't
Yes.
go to the corporate office ideally unless you do have some sort of correspondence.
Reach out to us. Let us know that you want to pop by. Yes, come by because we'll have not just me here, but I'll have 7 other regionals here and our vice president here. So your visit will be way more impactful than just coming to see me. I'd love to see you any day of the week, but this would be better for you in the
Corporate
long
offices,
run.
what are the best days to come? I know some days everyone's in on Mondays,
Yeah.
everyone's in on Wednesdays. Any recommendation, anyone listening?
For our specific company, I'd say Mondays because that's when we all get together, we huddle, we talk about our challenges, our wins, and what our goals are for the upcoming week. So I'd say coordinate with us for Mondays so you can
Not
come
Monday
in.
mornings, no.
Not Monday morning. We meet in the afternoons because I think I'm the only morning person in the office. But we meet in the afternoons. But definitely reach out so we could set that up. But for sure,
I've cut you off many times. The question that I
okay.
had originally was anything's not to do.
The templated emails, I hate those, especially when it says dear name. I'm like, you didn't even check that. Come on.
On top of not only not being able to get to the
Don't
emails,
email me.
don't call me name.
Yes.
Tina, from your perspective, what are some things over the years that you've seen that have really worked? I'm sure you've built some incredible partnerships over the years, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on some things that just don't work. So please stop doing those
Yeah.
things.
Well, don't call me Sally in an email because I'm like, okay, so that was not meant for me. You were blasting, and this is not personal, right?
Yeah,
So,
A little bit of research.
right, at least know my name.
Yeah.
No,
At
look,
minimum.
I mean, yes, I have some fantastic partnerships and relationships over the years. And I would say those that feel the strongest are, they're sending me information
Hmm.
so that I can know something, whether that's about an industry trend,
Mhm.
legislation, like they're adding value, right? They're saying,
Identifying blind
hey, we
spots.
thought you might want to see this, or this might be helpful, or did you hear that? You know, there's this exchange of knowledge and value. And
Without an expectation of
exactly, it's just, hey,
return.
you know, I thought of you the other day when I saw this. And, you know, maybe there is in the back of their mind, but I know these people well enough to know that, you know what, they actually just thought I should see this, right? I think another thing that I love that I'm seeing, and I've been able to help coordinate this is, you know, I get a lot I get a lot of flack for my LinkedIn presence, right? They're like, oh, LinkedIn, and but it's also a
What
great
kind of flack do you
forum.
get, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you know,
Maybe I'm the wrong
oh,
guy that loves
well,
your
you and
LinkedIn
me, you
presence,
know
but
what? We both probably have the same, you know,
I asked you that question, but I
yes.
know exactly what kind
Yeah,
of
you
flack
know
you
what I
get.
mean. So anyway, but like I had an industry partner, vendor, you know, supplier, whatever you want to call it, you know, reach out to me the other week, and they're like, "Hey, I know you're really busy. I'd love to, you know, be able to get to meet some of your team in this particular region. Do you think you could help connect me?"
Mm.
Yes, yes, and yes, all day
Mm.
long. You know, that's just a connection, right? It was like respectful, it was personal, it was like, hey, you
It was
know,
direct.
it was direct, but it was also just like, you know, can you help me, you know, connect? And I did. I made a connection, and I do that a lot. Um, what
You are a connector, I think
I
so.
do love to connect people because again, I do want to answer every single. I can't answer all the emails, especially when they're generic, especially when they're not my name. You know, like
You're not
you
deserving of a
know,
response if it's not
right?
your name.
Or and you know, because I'm on a roll with the things that don't work, I will get texts, I will get voicemails, or emails that say, "Hey, you know, we'd really love to work with you know XYZ company, Sears Regis Group." And I'm like, okay, you do. Did you know that? We're already working together. So, like,
Yeah.
that bothers me
Mm.
Yeah.
tremendously, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, how
Mm.
do you not know that we are already working together?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that is a lack
Yeah.
of understanding. And then my final like pet peeve, this is a Tina pet peeve, is on LinkedIn, I might be showcasing a new property or
Yeah.
a new team
I
member.
love
And
that
then
you do
it's
that.
the
Yeah.
insertion of, oh, we'd love to do your landscape.
Mm.
I'm like,
In
this
the
is not
comments.
appropriate. I will delete those
Yeah.
comments.
Yes.
Sorry, I will, because it's not
It's not the place.
it's not personal, it's not appropriate. But back to what you're doing well. Like it's the relationships. I do believe that a lot of the relationships do need to start on site because the on-site teams are the ones that you're going to be working with every single day, depending on the service, right?
Mm.
Then there's those corporate national contracts that have to come from the executives. But I do believe that, you know, stopping in and into an office, maybe leaving a card, maybe leaving, you know, somebody saying, hey, I'd love to, because, you know, the reality is no one answers the phone anymore, right? So you can't really call. And, you know, I can't even get
Yeah,
through
the
anyone on
calls
a
are
phone call
automated
anymore,
now,
right?
and yeah.
But like, hey, I'd love to, you know, come by and talk to your team, right? Or let's set a lunch and learn at our corporate office when all the regionals are in on a Monday so that, you know we've got a lunch hour and we're going to learn about each other.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Tina. It is, and maybe it's, you know, our years in the business that we still do appreciate a good. I know as a leader in the ops world, you know, I did love the calls that I got from my site teams to say we had a great interaction with this supplier. We should really think about doing
Yes.
you know business with them, or at least you know spending some time to learn more about their product or solution. And I tell a lot of my clients, you know, that I work with is don't and again, there is a disconnect at times, right? But don't disregard, you know, some of those on-site folks. They can be very influential to us that are leading large teams because we do, you know, often appreciate their perspective on these things, and they're the ones that will have ultimately will need their buy-in for some of these products and solutions. And so, not to mitigate, there are some disconnect at these levels, but. And again, you know, I think everyone has a little perspective on don't just show up, sometimes show up. If you're adding value, I think is the point that you guys are making. Even in the show up, a little bit of food, a little bit of positive energy in a day can go a long way on site. It's a tough day.
Yeah.
I'd love to get both of your feedback on partnerships.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to speak a little bit, right? Your point on like know my company, right, or get to know me, and
Yeah.
you know you getting flack for your LinkedIn presence, right? Um, I love when operators have a presence on LinkedIn because that's where I learn, right? I
Transparency.
understand
Mhm.
what the pain points are, how they're looking at industry trends, how they're prioritizing solutions in the market.
Yeah.
And I wish there was a ton more of that, because now LinkedIn is just a vendor carnival, right? It's inserting in the comments, I want to do your landscaping, and you get in there and I have to scroll through 75 posts of other vendors and talking heads talking about, their hot take or
I thought
their
you were going to say
perspective.
LinkedIn is just Tony's spam. I'm glad you didn't say that.
And so I would love to have more operators sharing their perspective and sharing their pain points and sharing their opinions on LinkedIn, because I'm eager to learn. I did a whole roadshow this year of just listening to operators and help me understand how you're prioritizing, how
that.
you're seeing trends coming down. And
Mm-hmm.
it shifted our company operations and product significantly over this year, right? And then to the other points you made on your do not do's, right? Like my frustration, because, you know, maybe it's just the Virgo in me, but I have a lot of the same do not do's because I get pitched as well.
Supplier
There's
side.
people
Yeah.
that want to support avenues of my business. And so, I feel those and I see those in our industry. And as supplier partners, like, we kind of know what happens behind the screen, like we know what's going on behind the wizard. Um, and so part of it is like, where are the consequences,
Mhm.
right? Like we we know how a lot of our friends, competitors, partners in the space actually operate, how their platform or product actually performs. We know whether they are vendors or partners in the way that they handle business. And so people have a lot of the same pet peeves or a lot of the same do not do's, or you slap your wrist, but then, you see that same partner supplier expand through that portfolio, right? Or it's like everybody is talking about how they partner or how they support or how they sell. Uh, and it's like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that. But they continue to do it because they continue to get away with it.
Mm.
They continue to have the success. And
Yeah.
so, you know, where are the consequences for breaching that?
Well, and I'll let the experts speak to that as operators, but ultimately, I think the consequences are in lack of performance, and that unfortunately can take some time to get to your levels to say, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, like, hey, this is just underperforming product. We were sold on a bill of goods, which I think is your
Yeah.
point, but unfortunately, time has told us that unfortunately, either our beta testing or our committees we weren't right on this,
Right.
and as a partner to ourselves, we're going to
Right.
say like we didn't nail
Right.
this one. We need to explore the marketplace. I think it's a fair point, David. Savannah, I'd love to get your thoughts just on great partnerships that you've cultivated over the years, and what were the essence of those relationships, and how they blossomed to be so productive and positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a relationship person, and I've never been in sales professionally before. So
When I
it's
first met you, I thought you're not the quintessential salesperson,
no,
but you've been very
absolutely not.
successful.
I was actually worried about it, actually, and in taking this
Bought
job.
all the
And
sales books.
I mean, but I think I am a natural relationship builder. I'm a one-on-one person, and I go to smaller local conferences like the interfaces or like the local apartment associations. I sit and listen to the panels. I take pictures of the operators who are sitting up there. I will follow up with an email saying, this really resonated with me, what you said. Here's a picture if you
That's
like
great.
it. Those are things that I do because I'm not going to hard sell somebody. I'm not going to make them listen about my product if they're not interested or open to it. But I am going to build a relationship. And the same goes, and I have a question actually, but the same goes with my fellow suppliers. David and I know David is a great partner in the industry, and I will recommend Lively to my clients because I know if they comment on our ability to partner with them and that they really appreciate our partnership, I will recommend other vendors that I know operate that same
And I think that
way.
goes a long way to the
Yeah, it
operators
really
to
does.
say, we got a great relationship with Savannah and her
Mhm.
product, and if you believe in Savannah and her product, you
Yeah.
guys are going to be all ears to
Yeah.
say, who else do you guys
Yeah,
trust,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It goes back to that all-in partnership, right? And I totally agree that the things that I'm saying about industry partners and that relationship is the same things that I believe about my clients
Mhm.
and the conversations that I have and the check-ins that I
Mhm.
have and the questions that I'm asking, right? The transparency. So it's about relationships. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you said that earlier. It's
Mhm.
like we can talk about the work relationship, but we're also talking about, life,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's across the board for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of, as we come to the latter third of the episode, I'd like to kind of give you guys the ability to kind of take a step back and say, if we were to redesign the industry for this to be productive, right, and for these relationships, and I know it's a big question, right, but if we were to say, hey, listen, we're going to start a multifamily industry, and we're going to have real estate assets, and we're going to have people running those real estate assets, and then we're going to have products and solutions that can help you run those assets. And we want to create structures and infrastructures and forums, to use the word we used earlier, to help you guys come together to learn how you guys can partner together, to use many of the same terms we've used. How could we go about doing that? And in my opinion, I think we're at this stage that we kind of need to reimagine this dialogue and these partnersghips. Maddie, I'll start with you. I know it's a big question.
It's a huge question.
But
I knew he
but
was going to start
like,
with me.
and again, it doesn't have to be as big as
Right.
it sounds, but are there proper forums? Is there collaboration efforts? Is there workshop forums that we can kind of put together as an industry? Does it start local? How big of a role does national organizers play in this? Because I do think that there's just a ton of pay to play stuff that is funding these things. Which, listen, we all need to eat and everybody needs to be funded, but to me, it's just diluting the integrity of some of these forums, and that is not good long term. And I think we're at a point, kind of a crossroads now, that there's a lot of muddy waters, and operator attendance at these conferences continues to go down. And so I think now is the time for us to be honest about that. So how do we unmuddy the waters, if you will, or provide opportunities for collaboration? And again, you could be thinking local, regional, or even
Right.
at a national scale.
I think that, I mean, personally, the way I would tackle this is I would start locally because you want to start small to affect change and essentially grow that and scale it up to a national level. But I think, and we were talking about it in the back just briefly, it all comes down to culture. So you have to have buy-in from everybody to be collaborative, be communicative, be honest with each other and have that open dialogue. Mutual respect, I think, is another big thing that I would like to implement, especially given the conversations we've had today.
I
And
mean,
it's
between the parties, the supplier and the
absolutely
operators.
both sides, so we need each other ultimately at the end of the
I,
day.
I think I'm glad you addressed that point. I think as operators, you need to hold other operators accountable.
Yes.
And to be honest, there's a part of me that sees what's happening on the operator side as a former operator for a long time that doesn't feel good.
No.
And so I think anybody listening on the operation side, and I know you guys are leaders with integrity on the operator side, I think it's important because it's hard for you guys suppliers to hold operators accountable. Ultimately, you're trying to sell product. Operators have to hold not only themselves personally accountable, but of course their peers as well. And so I'm glad that you said that it does start with culture and a culture of accountability. Tina, you've built great companies and great cultures as well. You and I
Yeah.
both know that it starts with accountability, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I think, one of the things you mentioned, and I hear you because I see it, is that the buy-in, doesn't always flow from the top down, right? Or from,
Bottom up.
the site up, right?
Right.
And I do think that comes back to company, right? And culture. And so I think having conversations like this is great. But, we're what, 5 people in a room, right?
Yeah.
So, but we need to have the conversations. And I think if enough of us are open and sit back, get a little humble. And at the end of the day, we cannot be successful without you, and you cannot be successful without us, right? We are running multi-million-dollar businesses. The pressure is on. The world's not behaving. The industry is making things
Residents
so
are
much
acting up.
harder.
Yeah.
Like there's all
Everything's
this
on
stuff,
fire.
but
Yes.
there's no reason that our industry partners should ever feel beneath an operator ever. I mean, that's just humanity,
Absolutely.
right? But there's also we should also never feel as operators that, we're being sold something and then you buy the product or the service and then you walk away. I've had partnerships in the past that weren't real partnerships where, we bought a product or a service and then there was no support. So when we think about like, what does that look like? What are you looking for? Well, and it's not just price.
Mhm.
It is about price to some level.
Sure.
It's about quality.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's about service. So how do you, get the best pricing without sacrificing quality and
Mm.
service? I
Right.
think those are
Value.
some of the mandates that
Mhm.
I look at. It's like,
Mhm.
a good price without the quality and the service doesn't matter,
Mhm.
right? You really need it all. And it goes back to, it is a two-way road. It is a win-win, like I said, I wish I could work with everybody, but at the end of the day,
Sure.
the darn product offerings, they're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
coming at
much.
us, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
let's
Mhm.
work together to find success. And I think the expectation for both of us is that you're not going to win 100% of the business and that we can't partner with 100% of the
Right.
business providers, right? But there's enough share to go
Mhm.
around.
Mhm.
Whether that's property management company to property management company or,
Yeah.
Supplier partner to supplier partner.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point that I think there's enough business to go
Mhm.
around, and I think a lot of folks don't realize that. Sometimes we're competing, that I see like for the same customers,
Yeah.
and the reality is there's so many units, there's
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
investors, owners, assets. Forget what the national number is, but it's big.
A lot.
It's a lot.
And it's not all Class A.
34
Right.
million.
Oh, it's
Is it about 34 million?
34 million
Yeah.
units.
Doesn't surprise me. David knows that, but
And
it's
and if anybody in our space won 10% of that,
Right.
everybody's
Yeah.
dreams come true,
Right?
right?
There you go.
Yeah.
And but it gets treated as if it's a zero-sum game,
Right.
right? And that creates a lot of the
angst.
and unnecessary competition and conflict and
Bad behavior.
misinformation,
Yeah.
bad behavior.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to get your thoughts on reimagining the industry. Savannah, I'll start with you, and I'll end with you, David. Just as you see it, you've heard obviously the operators' comments. Obviously, it continues to resonate with partnership, open collaboration, open conversation. Sure, this is 5 folks, but hopefully it gets out to a lot more than just 5 folks. Any thoughts on this, Savannah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of systemic issues that are generated to cause conflict and that unnecessary conflict. But I think it all boils down to like we are in a people business, right? And I say that all the time. Like we are all people. We are running communities and creating home
Mhm.
for a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
30 million units,
Mhm.
34
34
million
million.
units, And so I think the same way we would expect our teams to humanize the experience for their residents and their prospects to create a community and to create a home environment, we need to humanize our interactions within the industry as well, between supplier partners, between
Yeah.
suppliers and operators, between operators and their ownership groups, between operators and their teams, between, all of it needs to be more humanized and respectful and relationship driven because that's the industry we work in. And
Yeah.
if we were able to break down that and be able to get down, even having grace, like, a lot of people like they never get back to us, but like they're busy, like just
Right.
putting yourself in other people's shoes, understanding and humanizing the experience, I think to simplify it would really help all around.
Yeah, and at
beautifully
the
said.
same time, I think we hope a lot of people listen to this. I think who's going to be most encouraged by these conversations are going to be the site level property managers to hear powerful leaders on both sides of the aisle, like you guys, coming together to say, listen, we're doing this for their sake and, of course, the end resident's sake. I hope they're really encouraged. Who I hope also is listening to this conversation, who often isn't listening to these conversations, and I hate to say it, but I will, is senior, not even executives, but above them, investors, owners, these
Yeah.
types of folks. They're not as involved in the culture of multifamily as I think they need to be. Some are. Again, I'm not saying a broad stroke. But I think they defer that to management executives and their teams. Like, you guys figure that out. That's your industry. But I do think that it's important that much of that starts from the top with them, and then also executives at management companies as well. So hopefully they are listening more and more. I'm
Because that
providing.
pressure rolls downhill,
It does.
like I have a
Absolutely.
lot of clients who are like, oh, we love the product, we love the team, we love the partnership, but our owners aren't on board, right? Or they don't see the value or whatnot.
Yeah.
And
And
the
it-
Or
pressure,
they're squeezed
Right.
because at the end of the day,
It's
there's
financial
so
business, right.
much that they cannot control, right? So it's like
Exactly.
control what we can control. control because of the things we can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And the marketplace, the economy, all these sorts of things. And I think we're kind of in this perfect storm currently economically to have these conversations because it's been a tight squeeze the last couple
Yeah.
of years.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, everybody was riding high, 2021,
21.
22,
Yeah.
and then it's been a hard dip.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we're like, okay, let's try to sustain or create a sustainable framework
Mm-hmm.
for partnerships going forward because, the ebb and flow and the high and low that we just incurred over the last 5 years has been tough. David, just in conclusion,
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts here on just sort of this reimagine. You're a
Yeah.
creative guy. Like, how do we do this? Solve multifamily's problems for us. And,
Perfect. I'm glad you
David,
asked.
do that. Solve the problems.
So, since 2020, there's been tens of billions of dollars of capital into the prop tech space, and there's been tens of thousands of prop tech point solutions that have come to market, with each year bringing more than the year previous, because it's an opportunistic market for investment and for solution fit. And I think that creates an unfortunate truth that there are more bad partners than good partners in the industry, because it is I think good partners aren't following up or driving the outreach and the communication to chase a sale. We're asking those questions to identify a fit, right? And to your point on the buy-in coming down from the top to the bottom, I think a good partner, and I'll speak for myself and I'll speak for Savannah, knowing her product intimately, a good partner shoulders the responsibility of converting compliance to commitment, right? And so even if it is initially compliance from the top down, right? You need to be on this kickoff call. You need to be on this training call. We're testing this product out. Then a good partner, we believe that it's our responsibility to transform that compliance to commitment, to make them an advocate and a brand champion of our partnership. And so I think that's a piece that's an unfortunate truth. I think the other piece around it is with Lively was built, and we were able to grow our product stack to the comprehensive, functional platform that it is today because we believed that the best product would win. And so it wasn't about telling a story or making promises or having giant booths at conferences. It was delivering a product that actually stands behind what it says it does. And so if I could change multifamily, if I could fix it,
magic wand.
it would be creating an industry where the best products win through everything that we've talked about today, right? Through better education of the decision makers, through understanding the nuances and the how behind how your platforms deliver the outcomes, about setting realistic, aligned expectations on what those outcomes need to be.
Right.
And so being able to have an aligned viewpoint and perspective of how do you define the best technology, and then how do you get the best technology in front of the right people, and whether that is an evolution of conferences, if it's the trade shows, if it's conversations like this, right? Good partners are looking for that good fit and the ability to demonstrate that we'll follow through on our promises.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
Yeah, I think well said, David. I mean, I think we touched on a lot of really good things. Obviously, we talked about culture, we talked about best product wins, and I think if we create that culture of accountability, and ultimately, I think collectively we all have our part to play in creating those cultures within our own organizations, with our own segment or side of the industry. And I think if we do that, and we do that, come at it every single day with the best intentions, over time, over a long period of time in our careers, I think we can make a positive influence. And I just want to thank you guys for being here today. I think this is one of initial steps of many, I'm sure, in the future of elevated conversations. And I just want to thank you for spending a little bit of time of your busy day. I know there's a lot of emails coming in your inbox, even as we speak. But I thought
We're all
today's-
going to email each other, text each other, and call and see what happens.
With the right names.
Yes.
I just
Right,
again,
Sally?
Okay, Lisa.
I just want to thank you guys again for your time today, and I think it was a really, really great, productive conversation, and hopefully those listening got a lot out of today. I know I did. So thank you guys for being a part of the Multifamily Interrogation Room.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.